Can you believe the Nintendo Switch is over 5 years old at this point? I got this literally a few months into starting my PhD, and now I'm sat here, a doctor of chemistry, reviewing the Nintendo Switch over 5 years after it was released. I am literally so thankful for this thing, because if this didn't come into my life, I probably would have started making makeup videos on YouTube. So sincerely, thank you. Before we get into the rest of this video, I just wanted to thank today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for anyone who loves learning and wants to explore their creativity and learn new skills. This is made even easier by the fact that it's completely ad-free, so you can stay focused, and there's new classes added each week, so there's always something new to learn. I have especially found the classes on editing and creating YouTube videos to be especially useful. Before embarking on my content creation journey, I actually knew nothing about how to create a YouTube video or how to edit. So Skillshare has been especially handy. I especially enjoyed MKBHD's or Marquise Brownlee's videos on YouTube success, as it covers the whole YouTube making process from start to finish. And the first 1,000 people to use the link down below will get 1 free month of Skillshare. And a big thank you to them for supporting the channel. To start things off, it's important to remember that the Switch I am holding right here, the OG Switch, is not the same Nintendo Switch you can buy right now. In fact, they changed some of the internal parts, meaning that now the Nintendo Switch has a much larger battery life than my poor guy over here that lasted 4 hours when I played Breath of the Wild. It was bad. Also, when the Nintendo Switch launched, there were literally only a handful of games you could play on it. And for one of the first times ever, the Nintendo Switch was not backwards compatible, meaning that the launch games were literally all you could play on the Switch. And one of which was 1-2 Switch, which should have been free, man. Should have been free. But right now, 5.5 years on, there are over 4,400 games you can play on the Nintendo Switch, which is absolutely bonkers. Back when I first got this, the OG Switch was literally all there was on the market. But now, not only can you buy this with the better battery life, you can also buy the cheaper Switch Lite, which I don't actually own, but the colors on the Switch Lite are unrivaled on every single other Switch. They're so good. Let me have this Switch in the same colors as the Switch Lite, please. And then you also have the OLED. If you can get some sort of deal with the game for this Switch, it's always a better choice than this one. You'll be surprised how much just upgrading the screen can really make a difference, but it does. Although I do slightly regret buying my OLED when it first came out, because the Splatoon version is one of the most beautiful things I have ever seen, and I want it so bad, but I literally have no reason to own 2 OLEDs. So I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stay strong. First thing we're going to talk about is the Switch's functionality, and I think the most important thing to bring up is Joy-Con drift. Now, for those who don't know, you can actually send your controllers in to Nintendo to fix for free. If you have a normal Switch and an OLED, then that basically means you just have to find alternate controllers while you send them in to use until you get them back. However, this is where I get a bit iffy about recommending the Switch Lite, because if you get Joy-Con drift on your Switch Lite, you have to send your entire Switch into Nintendo. Now, they are incredibly speedy with it, but I don't know about you, but going a whole week without my Switch for something that is Nintendo's fault is super annoying, so just something to bear in mind. Now on to the OG Switch. The first thing I want to talk about is this thing right here, the foot stand. Why you would pay in the region of 200 to 300 pounds for a device and then trust it to stand up on this tiny bit of plastic, I will never know. Look how flimsy it is. Nintendo really said, let's gamble with your money. This by far is the worst function of the Switch. It's useless. And I don't know about you, but I always get worried about having my SD card just poking out in the wild. At least they fixed it when they did the OLED. Another reason why I love the OLED. I also feel like they made the Nintendo Switch almost too portable. It is incredibly thin to the point where I think it's borderline uncomfortable to hold. I have a little grip for when I play handheld a lot, because this just gives me cramp holding onto this, and I have tiny hands. Someone with much bigger hands than me is going to find this even worse. A part of me really does wish that Nintendo added even just half a centimeter to a centimeter onto the back of this, made it slightly heavier, and also therefore could probably make it slightly more powerful. Speaking of more powerful, that is something I'd love the Nintendo Switch to be. However, am I the only person who really isn't that bothered about the Switch not being 4K? Like, I can't even tell you if my TV is 4K compatible, because I have no idea. It really doesn't bother me. I'd much rather have it more powerful but stay 1080p and have every game run at like 60 FPS than have it chunkier but run 4K only. And then we have the screen. I think the screen is possibly the thing that ages the Nintendo Switch the most. Look at those bezels. They're huge. The OLED literally looks so much more modern just because they got rid of the bezels. And whilst this screen isn't terrible, this is definitely such a big upgrade and way better if you want to play handheld. Also, I really don't see the point in it having a touchscreen. The only time I've used the touchscreen on my Switch is to connect a controller, and that's it. And I only know of like one game that used the touchscreen. I think I would have definitely taken a better screen with no touchscreen over this having a touchscreen. I don't think it was worth the compromise. And then finally, we have the dock. To be fair, for 5 years, this isn't looking too rough. The reason why I have a screen protector on my current Switch was in the first few weeks of the Nintendo Switch coming out, there were reports that the dock actually scratched your Switch. That's why the OLED has actual padding inside of it. I don't know if anyone else was like this, but I was actually surprised by how flimsy this was when I first got it. I don't know why I expected more, but I did. The only thing I wish is that, you know how like the Xbox, you can like completely customize your controllers with like your name on the bottom and pattern and whatever color combination you want. I wish you could do the same for the Switch. I would pay a good amount of money to get this kind of customization on this. Like, imagine having a dock with your name on it. Oh, it'd be so cool. The thing that makes all of these minor gripes worth it is the fact that I can take any game from my TV and play it on the road. Do you know how many times this has saved me on train journeys, bus journeys? I even used to take my Nintendo Switch into the lab when my reactions would take so long it got really boring, so I could just sit there and pass the time by gaming. I didn't realize how much I needed to be able to play games in bed till I played my first game in bed, and it was revolutionary. And that is the magic of the Nintendo Switch. Do you know how many indie games I bought for a second time on the Nintendo Switch, like Stardew, just so I could play it in bed? Let me know which games you have multiple of because you just needed it on the Switch in the comments down below. Also, does anyone remember Dockgate? That's what I'm calling that weird period of time where all the third-party docks were bricking Nintendo Switches. Now let's talk about something that's the same on all Switches, and that's the Nintendo Switch interface. I love how simple it is, but I wish we could customize it. You already have the Nintendo Switch online app that lets you set your own icons, so why can't we buy themes on there too? I'd love the extra layer of customization. And speaking of online, let's talk about the eShop, shall we? Possibly the weakest feature on the Nintendo Switch. With there being over 4,000 games on the Switch, why is there no easy way to browse through them? And why, when you browse through them, is there absolutely no quality control? Especially if you go through the sales section, you will come across some of the most shocking games you cannot believe got allowed on the Nintendo Switch. We're talking like terrible mobile port type games. Don't get me wrong, I honestly love the fact that Nintendo have gotten a lot more lax on what they allow on their platform. For example, the old Nintendo would never let a game like Bayonetta on their consoles, and now it's thriving. But some quality control would really be good because some of these games are so bad. But other than that, I love the fact that even my mum can use the Nintendo Switch. Put it into perspective, an iPad she can't use. Nintendo Switch though, she's got the hang of it pretty fast. And I think that's a good sign that it's a good UI. Quality control aside, the Nintendo Switch is home to so many of my favorite games. And I adore the range that this console has. The Nintendo Switch excels in an area that every single games company seems to be pulling away from, and that's couch co-op. Although I wonder how much of that is down to the fact that Nintendo are so unwilling to move with the times with online play, and instead insist that you need a mobile phone app to communicate on the Nintendo Switch. There is literally no better console for sitting down with your family and playing games, especially playing games with non-gamers. Games like Mario Party and Switch Sport are accessible for gamers, non-gamers, old gamers, young gamers, and literally everyone in between. The Nintendo Switch is literally a staple for every single Christmas I've had since I've gotten it. It is a must for Christmas Day. And in terms of single player, there are plenty of games for your typical gamers and your cozy / casual gamers too. For casual cozy gamers, we have first party games like Animal Crossing, along with indie games that have been ported, which if I'm honest, the indie games have been pulling their weight in the most recent months on the Nintendo Switch. And in the months where the AAA game releases are a little bit dry, this right here is just an indie game in bed machine. And I actually love that, as I have tried more indie games in the last 5 months than I have in my whole life before that. And I think that's a great thing. And then for your more typical gamer, you have things like competitive shooters in the form of Splatoon and Splatoon 3 coming out. You also have RPGs galore on the Nintendo Switch, including games like Xenoblade and Octopath Traveler. And then as it is Nintendo, you also have the OG IPs, with arguably the best Mario and best Zelda game on this console. You also have Pokemon too. Look, I love Sword and Shield, but I doubt anyone is going to argue that Sword and Shield is the best Pokemon game to have ever come out. Let's be honest. And yes, this isn't the most powerful console on the planet right now, but you can't deny that the developers have used this and given us some of the most beautiful games on this Switch. Sometimes I cannot believe it's coming from something this small. It blows my mind. There's also a ton of games planned for the second half of 2022. We have big titles like Splatoon 3, Bayonetta 3, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and one of the games which I'm really looking forward to, Harvestella. I also think with the release of Splatoon 3 next month, that the Nintendo Switch is going nowhere anytime soon. I reckon it's going to be at least 2 years before we hear anything about another console, if I'm honest. And even then, I truly hope that we're just going to get a Nintendo Switch 2, because all I really want changed is for this to be more powerful. And that's it. I love the concept of being able to play my Nintendo Switch in bed, on the train, and on the TV, and I don't want that concept to go anywhere anytime fast. My overall opinion is I have absolutely loved my time with the Nintendo Switch. No, it's not perfect, but which console has ever been 100% perfect? I've made so many memories with this console, both in real life with my friends and family and online too. So if you're thinking about buying a Nintendo Switch in 2022, as always, all I've got to say, do it. And if you want to see a game that only costs £15 and is a great buy coming out in the next few months, make sure you click this video here. I'll see you next time. Bye.